In this lecture, I am going to discuss treatment of cough. Because cough is a symptom rather than disease, various drugs used in treatment of cough are both disease-specific and patient-dependent. By definition, cough is forcible expulsion of foreign body or gas out of respiratory tract. So its aim is very useful, trying to get rid of any foreign structures, whether solid, whether liquid, whether gas, out of respiratory tract, avoiding its harmful effects on respiratory tract and even on systemic absorption on the whole body. That's why it is commonly protective, although in some cases it is very harmful and giving rise to many diseases. And is reflex in nature, that is requiring center, afferent, receptor, and then efferent and effector organ. That is these 5 parameters. And this reflex is beginning by vagal nerve endings, and that's why it is more common at night, especially because we are bedridden at night, and by vagal tone excess secretion at night, we have increased nasal secretion, increased pharyngeal secretion, bronchial secretion, and all other body secretion. They are mainly nocturnal because they are vagal in origin. And the diseases underlying the symptom cough are variable, and cough is the universal symptom of these diseases. These may be inside respiratory tract, coming from airway passages, or even outside. Why? We'll see now. Because cough is reflex, so its main part involved will be center. And here the center is cough center above respiratory center. Why? Because the vital center inside our body, regulation, are mainly in the medulla. The more vital center, the lower it is. So, respiratory center being more vital than cough center is lower, and cough center less vital above respiratory center. But of course, many connections communicate this cough center from various CNS pathway, apart from respiratory center. And these centers above or related to cough center are containing synapses with many chemical transmitters and many receptors. Again, these are affected by various drugs, agonists and antagonists, and can cause or inhibit cough accordingly. Now, from this center, afferents come, and these afferents come across the vagal fibers. And these vagal fibers come onto this cough center, but in the center we have central synapses, including number receptors. These number receptors, as you know, are the receptors excited by glutamate. Glutamate is the major excitatory chemical transmitter in the brain. And when vagal nerve ending come to the respiratory center, in the central synapses, they will release glutamate, and glutamate will stimulate number receptors. These number receptors are called number because of N-methyl D-aspartate, but simply NAMDA or NMDA receptors. Now, these vagal nerve endings are derived their activity via receptors. These receptors, as I mentioned, are either in respiratory tract or outside respiratory tract. So the presence of cough does not necessarily mean that it is a respiratory disease. But number one, of course, respiratory tract is a major cause of cough via mechanoreceptors above and chemoreceptors below. Mechanoreceptors are above to get rid of larger molecular weight substances, while chemoreceptors are below to sense small size molecules. And these chemoreceptors contain many receptors and many transmitters, of course, for example, histamine, kinins, and so on. And their effect is transmitted to vagal afferent nerve fibers into the cough center. Number two, extrapulmonary or extra-respiratory receptors can come from the heart, stomach, and ear. Again, they are vagal in origin. That is very important because sometimes cardiac diseases like myocardial infarction may present with cough. And we can say that the patient has a respiratory problem, which is not the case. Simply, many gastric diseases can present instead of vomiting by cough. And again, this cannot make us know or suggest that it is respiratory disease. So we can coordinate all symptoms together to distinguish cough from respiratory disease and from extrapulmonary systems. Again, in the ear, foreign body in the ear or ear wash can present with cough, especially in children. And this is very clinical situation in some cases, of course. Now, after afferent receiving stimuli from various receptors and coming to the cough center, now they will, from this cough center will pass efferent. Efferent will come through respiratory muscle, that is phrenic nerve and intercostal nerve. And lastly, the effector organ will be respiratory muscle, diaphragm, and intercostal muscles. So this cough is a reflex, formed of five parts. Inside the center is cough center, coming from afferent vagal nerve fibers. These afferent are stimulated by receptors. And after the center is stimulated, it will send efferent, and this efferent will stimulate respiratory muscles. Now, types of cough. First type of cough is dry cough. And this dry cough secretes nothing or very minute secretions. So it is useless. Why? Because the aim of cough is to get rid out of any harmful structure. And so, being useless, it may be even harmful. And this will mention in drug therapy because in some cases we can treat dry cough and not in others. And the drug used for treatment of dry cough, that is prevention of cough, of course only in harmful or dangerous cases, these drugs are termed antitussives. So antitussives are drugs which specifically inhibit or treat dry cough. In contrast, in cough, with which the secretions are more and more, especially if they are vivid copious secretion, the type of cough here is termed productive cough. And of course this is a useful cough because it achieves the aim of cough, which is getting rid of any harmful material out of respiratory tract. And the drugs used for treatment of this productive cough, that is to help the productive cough to get rid out of harmful substance, are called male expectorants, and subdivision of this expectorant is called mucolytics. So generally speaking, treatment of cough is termed antitussive when the drug used for dry cough, whether if there copious increased viscous secretion, that's a productive cough, expectorant and mucolytics are used. Now, cough duration. Cough duration is variable, and variability of duration indicates the causative disease, as well as the type of therapy required. So we can correlate the receptors, the center of cough, cough duration, the patient condition, and various diseases to this cough duration and choose the proper treatment. Otherwise, the drug will be not helpful or even maybe harmful. First, simple acute cough with less than 3 weeks duration. And this is simple, and in many cases treatment may be not required, and even early treatment may be harmful because it will return foreign body and harmful secretions inside the respiratory tract. The next, subacute, from 3 to 8 weeks. Thirdly, and more importantly, for treatment and even diagnosis and prognosis, is chronic cough. And chronic cough is characterized by etiological causes. I will mention later 3 major causes of chronic cough, and this chronic cough means more than 8 weeks. That's about more than 2 months duration. First, uses of antitussives and expectorants. I mentioned that cough is due to many diseases, and even in respiratory problem, various types are involved. So treatment, choice, efficacy, and safety must be well studied. For example, treatment. Some types, as I mentioned, are accompanied by dry cough, so given antitussives. Others are characterized by secretions requiring expectorants. Still in others, the problem is in the disease itself. We cannot avoid dry cough, or even if dry cough is prevented, it will be harmful to the patient, avoiding getting rid of anything. Also, productive cough may be the only problem, and expectorant alone cannot solve the problem. That is why treatment of cough by antitussives or expectorant specifically are not the only solution for treatment of cough. Next, beyond the choice of the drug, whether specific antitussive or specific expectorant, or even used as etiological therapy for this cough, efficacy and safety must be considered. For example, many drugs have high efficacy, for example, herbs and so on, but they are not safe. Also, in children, specifically before 6 months age, or sometimes even 2 years age, many drugs used for expectoration and for cough are quite efficacy action, but they are not safe. And even if it is written that these, for example, herbs are safe, it is not true, because all studies are dependent on acute studies with short-term medication. But the long-term adverse effects of these herbs and possibly many other drugs is very dangerous. So, treatment was resulted to in certain clinical situation. Now, cough, as I mentioned, is protective reflex to get rid of microbes, allergens, and other foreign substances. So, cough should be encouraged initially, especially in the early days, to avoid these substances. Why? Because we know the defense mechanism of our upper respiratory tract. For example, the bronchial secretion can trap any microbe or allergen. The mucociliary transport can get rid out or expel any foreign secretions and so on. But, as I mentioned, in some cases, when these reflexes are more and more overwhelming and even harmful, now we can use either antitussives or expectorants. So antitussives are not used in any dry cough even. They are used only when cough is unproductive. This is number one, and not all. Number two, distressing. That is getting the birth annoying, not well for this cough, disturbing his normal life, eating, asleep, and so on. Even sometimes it is painful cough and exhausting due to, for example, extra action of respiratory muscles and so on. Because of the receptors involved have many other actions, and excess of this cough can reduce or increase airway damage. Or if this dry cough, unproductive cough, is prolonged for days and even weeks and even months, it will cause morbidity. Now, morbidity can be serious, and this is very well known to all of us. After many diseases, for example, upper respiratory tract infection, and I mentioned the most important causes of drug-induced morbidity. These are first interfering with sleep, causing sleep disturbances. Next, chest pain. Chest pain is common and even may be mistaken for other cardiovascular diseases or even pulmonary diseases, but the main cause may be cough. So this is a second morbidity of long-term cough. Thirdly, hernia. A major cause of hernia necessitating surgery, especially in old people with dangerous complications and so on, is caused by chronic cough. Next, urinary incontinence, especially in old patients, in menopausal females, and so on. The only triggering for this urinary incontinence is dry cough in many cases. Again, neuropsychiatric disorders. Neuropsychiatric disorders by chronic cough are associated with many psychological or psychiatric diseases, especially in nocturnal cough. And this creates many problems associating even psychiatric or psychotropic drugs. So the first specific treatment of cough, specific, again I repeat, specific is antitussives for dry cough. The second is expectorants. Expectorants are used, as I mentioned, in productive cough to get off two things. Bronchial, number one, secretion, and number two, thick. Because if bronchial secretion are not so increased, they need nothing to deal with. Again, if secretions are not thick, they can be easily expelled out of respiratory tract without even expectorants. Because I mentioned that the specific therapy of cough, either antitussive or expectorants, are not needed in some cases, according to disease and patient and chronicity and so on, now we have a new antitussive approach. And this new antitussive approach is mainly mediated by what? Cough or antitussive or expectorant adjuvants. So cough therapy adjuvants are now even far more important than classic therapy of cough by antitussives or expectorant, because it is far more beneficial to the patient and will shorten the long-term cough produced by various diseases. Moreover, this adjuvant, although not primarily acting on cough center or bronchial system, they have some antitussive activity and also specific action in treatment of cough in different clinical diseases. That to say, when I mention this adjuvant for cough therapy, I mean that they are not primarily used, for example, as antitussive or expectorant, but they have some, or they're not primary antitussive action, but their major action is to minimize dry cough or productive cough problems and help to get the problems of respiratory disease. Most important, this in chronic cough. Chronic cough, as I mentioned, occurring for more than 2 months or 8 weeks, it is very common and very serious. And we have 3 major common causes of this chronic cough. 3 major common causes. Number 1, post-nasal drip. That is very common, for example, in patients with frequent exposure to common cold, allergic, especially rhinosinusitis, that is chronic sinusitis, for example, with increased copious secretion out of the nasal sinus, with the backward flow over the pharynx, larynx, and so on. This is number 1. And secondly, bronchial asthma, with copious secretion, because chronic asthma is a chronic problem with increased thick bronchial secretion, and this will cause chronic cough. Thirdly, GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease with reflux esophagitis. It is very, very important as a major cause of chronic cough, and usually, or even more commonly, misdiagnosed by most physicians. And the cause of this GERD, that is reflux HCl regurgitation of gastric content into lower end of esophagus with irritation. This HCl not necessarily being increased in amount, that is derived from upper part of the stomach into the lower end of esophagus in large amount, but even small amounts of HCl can irritate lower end of esophagus, causing cough. And this is important to regulate therapy, because most people treated by cough causing GERD used insufficient doses of anti-GERD therapy, which is very important and necessitate proper drug as well as dose choice. And we should know in chronic cough, to understand drug therapy of this state, that the major problem in chronic cough is bronchial hyperresponsiveness. This means that even if we have any secretion of minute amounts, any part, even in esophagus, any area supplied by vagal afferent terminals, it will can initiate increased bronchial secretions. And I will explain this triad, that is post-nasal drip, bronchial asthma, and GERD one by one. The first two conditions commonly cause chronic cough are, as I mentioned, post-nasal drip and bronchial asthma. In these cases, inflammatory mediators are released. As we know, many mediators, for example, histamine, 5-HT, cholinergic, bradykinin, serotonin, and so histamine and prostaglandin, all these mediators are released, and they will cause peripheral sensitization of airway vagal afferent nerves anywhere. Again, anywhere. That is in respiratory and outside respiratory tract. Now, being present in the upper respiratory tract in post nasal dripping and so on, nasal stimulation and rhinosinusitis, that is involvement of sinuses by chronic inflammation and inflammatory secretion, will cause additionally central sensitization via brainstem conversion of trigeminal and vagal afferents. Conversion instead of SG, conversion. Conversion, that is to say, afferent from sinuses, from nose, come into the brainstem and converge with fibers coming from vagal afferent fibers and cause summation and exaggeration of cough. So this is the mechanism of chronic cough initiated by the first two causes of chronic cough. The third cause of cough is GERD. Similarly, vagal afferent nerve innervating both respiratory systems, number one, and esophagus, converge, that is, come together on the same neuron in the brainstem, causing summation of nerve impulses and transmitters, and causing, consequently, upregulation of cough center response. So this is additional action, peripherally and centrally. Now, what is the significant pharmacological of this? The significance is that we can use large dose therapy because to avoid all these secretions, because even physiological levels of reflux can cause cough. Number 3 is bronchial asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. Now, in this bronchial asthma, as you know, is used various bronchodilators. And the mechanism of many of these drugs, apart from, for example, bronchodilation and anti-inflammatory action, is to cause increased mucociliary transport. This is produced by most of these commonly used bronchodilators, whether selective beta-2 agonists or muscarinic antagonists, ipratropium, bromide, and tiotropium, and even thiophelline. All these drugs not only are bronchodilator, but also increase mucociliary transport, getting out of harmful secretion out of respiratory tract. So the first 3 are bronchodilators. And bronchodilation, of course, will decrease pressure over these receptors with afferent nerve effect. Also, inhaled steroids. As we know, inhaled steroids have anti-inflammatory actions, and these anti-inflammatory actions will decrease inflammatory mediator release, causing improvement of the respiratory tract condition. Fourthly, allergy. Of course, antihistaminic and inhaled steroid have potent anti-allergic effects as well as some antitussive action. Now GERD. GERD caused by HCl regurgitation into lower end of esophagus, so decreased by drugs which decrease HCl secretion. Most important is protopump inhibitors, and less potent will be H2 antagonists, as ranitidine, famotidine, and so on. Now, because I mentioned that we have conversion of fibers, so we can decrease HCl to much more extent than in usual GERD cases, because in cough we have potentiating effect. So here, drugs can be used to markedly decrease gastric acidity. Otherwise, they will be useless. Now, specific antitussives. Specific antitussives may be acting either by inhibiting cough center or acting peripheral. First, we can simply discuss peripheral because they are not common or potent like central drugs. Peripheral drugs commonly involves carbetapentine. Carbetapentine has local anesthetic action, that is blocking of receptors supplying the vagal afferent with stimulation. That is local anesthesia, that is suppression of these receptors. And it has atropine-like action, and so abolishing the vagal action of afferent nerve endings. The second will be benzonatate. Benzonatate is local anesthetic. This local anesthetic also will abolish afferent receptors and so afferent stimuli for cough reflex. But unlike the first carbetapentine, which acts on the upper airway passages, benzonatate acts lower down in the lower respiratory system. That is, it blocks the stretch receptors in pulmonary alveoli, thereby preventing afferent stimuli of cough reflex. Now, more commonly used are the centrally acting antitussives, inhibiting specifically, although they affect other center, but the desired level is to inhibit cough centers. The major common group is group of opioids related to morphine. As we know, these opioids act at higher brain level centers, that is cerebral cortex as well as sensory cortex, and also more down center, that is cough center and respiratory center. The above centers inhibiting respiratory cerebral cortex and sensory cortex act as narcotic. That is narcotic that is inducing sleeping with addiction, that is physical dependent, psychological dependent, physical dependence, and all these problems. So this narcotic can cause sleep, sedation, drowsiness, and on chronic use they can be addictive, of course, and causing physical as well as psychological dependence, and they are quite dangerous. And so instead we can use opioid also, but non-narcotics. Actually they are not absolutely non-narcotic but relatively, so they actually are less narcotic, but again they can cause addiction, sedation and so on, but to less extent compared to narcotic opioids. Opioid narcotic include the very famous drug codeine and the more potent derivative hydrocodeine, while non-narcotic include the very famous drug dextromethorphan, very famous either monotherapy or combination antitussive therapy, and noscapine. So these are the opioids used as antitussives. Now, non-opioids with less dangerous of these narcotic effects and so on are carbetapentane and benzonatate. Not to forget that these two drugs, non-opioids, not only have central antitussive action via inhibiting cough center, but as well peripheral actions as I mentioned before. So these are the main drugs used as antitussives. Of course, the indication mentioned before are applied to all these drugs. But the adverse effects of these drugs, as I mentioned, sedation and dizziness, because they affect higher brain centers. Dizziness means drowsiness plus blurring of vision, as you know. And these drugs, being morphine-like drugs, they stimulate chemoreceptor trigger zone, CTZ, causing nausea and vomiting, and they have peripheral action causing constipation. So the opioid, apart from beneficial antitussive action, because I mentioned they inhibit CNS centers higher up cerebral cortex and sensory cortex, causing narcotic analgesic action, but as well in higher doses cough center. But this drug-specific antitussive inhibits cough center at lower doses. Next, as I mentioned, non-addictive opioid antitussives. They are similar to opioid like morphine, but more specific on cough center. And so they are preferred because they are specific cough centers, suppressant, more potent, and less adverse effects of the other opioids, that is less sedation and dizziness, less constipation, and less nausea and vomiting compared to the previous group of drugs. Now, because of the recent understanding of various transmitters and receptors involved in cough reflex, peripherally and centrally, new antitussives are now potentially to be used. In the very near future, most of these drugs will be the main antitussive therapy, and they will replace older drugs, opioids, and so on. These drugs, as I mentioned, depends on the fact that cough receptors, I mentioned before, stimulation by whatever stimuli will increase centrally glutamate release. And this occurs centrally in the nucleus tractus solitarius, and this will cause NAMDA receptor stimulation. And this process centrally is potentiated by neurokinases. Now, this site can be a trigger for release of many drugs in the future. Actually, many of them are now under development or under evaluation. First will be NAMDA antagonist. As you know, NAMDA antagonists, for example, memantine, are very commonly used nowadays in central degenerative disease as Alzheimer's disease and so on, because NAMDA stimulation causes brain damage via increased calcium influx into neurons with excitotoxicity resulting in brain damage. Now, these drugs, because they antagonize NAMDA, so they can be beneficial in the future as novel antitussives. Not necessary to use the same famous NAMDA antagonist memantine, but we can use other more specific NAMDA antagonists regarding cough suppression. Again, because neurokinins potentiate this cough mechanism centrally, we can use neurokinin antagonist. Now, leukotrienes, as I mentioned, with many receptors, are responsible preferably by cough initiation, so we can use leukotriene receptor antagonists. Not necessarily montelukast or zafilokast, but other drugs may be more specific as antagonists for this receptor coming to afferent vagal stimuli of cough reflex. Again, cough is a very important inhibitory chemical transmitter in the brain, in contrast to glutamate, as you know. So we can use either NAMDA antagonist, because NAMDA is excitatory, or GABA receptor agonist, because while NAMDA represents glutamate, the major excitatory chemical transmitter in the brain, GABA represents the main inhibitory chemical brain transmitter. Also local anesthetics, as inhaled lidocaine, by blocking receptors as coming stimuli for afferent vagal nerve fibers. Now, expectorants. And as I mentioned, expectorants are drugs liquefying sputum, that is bronchial secretion, by one of two main mechanisms. Either by increasing volume, that is, instead of this thick secretion, I can increase its water content, like this I will add water vapor, and this is the classic item expectorants. Or next, by leaving the volume of sputum as such, bronchial secretion without increasing volume, but rather to destroy this molecule of this thick secretion, making them less viscous to be easily expelled out of respiratory tract. That is to decrease viscosity. But classically speaking, the term expectorant refers to the first group of mechanisms, that is increased volume of sputum or bronchial secretion. So liquefying this sputum to get rid out by the reflex of cough. But the drug causing the second group of mechanisms, again I repeat, will decrease viscosity, not by increasing water and dissolution of this thick sputum, but rather by destruction chemically of this thick sputum secretion. And these drugs are more specifically termed mucolytic, by its name mucolytic, that is lysis of the thick mucus. Now, either expectorants or mucolytics are used in bronchitis, bronchial asthma, and emphysema. That's diseases very common to produce thick bronchial secretion. We have three mechanisms of these expectorants. Number one is direct stimulation. What is the mechanism? First, to understand this mechanism, the examples achieving this direct stimulation are aromatic or volatile plants or stimulant expectorant. And so we can see in the last line, examples are volatile oils like menthol, tincture tolu, tincture benzoin, very common names, especially in children and smokers and so on, very commonly used by inhalation through water vapor. These plants, menthol, benzoin, and tulu, and for example, even gawafa, very famous, telu, and so on, very common plants, and even they are present in many expectorant syrup and so on, especially used by children and others very, very commonly. These plants release volatile oils. And the volatile oils by the aromatic nature, they are irritant to the bronchial glands, causing increased sputum volume directly. And this sputum volume will be watery to liquefy the viscous secretion, causing its easy expulsion out of respiratory tract. Again, these vapors or volatile oil plants have irritant action to the microbes, that is antiseptic action. And so they have antimicrobial action with avoidance of bad odor released by various secretions and inflammatory reactions. So they have deodorant action, that is avoiding the bad odor of bronchial secretions. By virtue of these three mechanisms, now the bronchial mucosa will be very ready to stimulate repair and healing of destroyed epithelium in respiratory tract. The second expectorant mechanism is reflex stimulation. And reflex stimulation, as you note, is very common, what we call gastrobronchial reflex. That is, stimulation of stomach, gastric mucosa, will reflexly stimulate bronchial gland secretion. And so, the examples used for reflex stimulation of bronchial secretion via gastric irritation are either acid or gastric alkaline irritant. Alkaline, for example, sodium and potassium acetate or citrate, or acid like ammonium chloride or ammonium carbonate. Again, tincture ipecacuanha or ipecac is very famous irritant to the gastric mucosa, thereby increasing reflexly bronchial secretion of watery nature that liquefies thick, tenacious, viscous bronchial secretion. The third example of expectorant is potassium iodide. Now, potassium iodide will be a summary of all mechanisms I mentioned. That is, like volatile oil, it is excreted via bronchial gland, like volatile oil, causing direct bronchial gland secretion. Secondly, like reflex drugs, irritant drugs, it also irritates gastric mucosa, causing reflex stimulation of bronchial glands. But the third mechanism will be a mucolytic mechanism. That is, increased butylatic activity of sputum enzyme, causing destruction, and so it has expectorant as well as mucolytic effect. And this drug is very, very commonly used in many cases of cough, productive cough. And in many cases, it is wrongly used, and it should be contraindicated in many conditions, as I mentioned. Adverse effect, because of this very commonly used drug to avoid bronchospasm. So it can, as mentioned, can lead to respiratory tract irritation of bronchial mucosa, bronchial gland, and so on. So in asthmatic, it will not be effective, even it will be harmful because of bronchospasm irritation. So it should be avoided by asthmatics. Next, iodism. Ism, as I mentioned, it is chronic toxicity by drugs, if added by the end of drug. So iodism will be associated with increased secretion in the nose, rhinorrhea, in the conjunctival lacrimation, in the mouth salivation, and even in bronchial secretion. Of course, the only desirable effect is increased bronchial secretion, but not increase other secretions. The third will be allergy by iodine. Fourth, as you know, relation between iodide and thyroid function. So it can lead to hypothyroidism. Why hypo? Because it is in excess dose, so leading to negative feedback suppression of thyroid function. Again, because I mentioned it irritates gastric mucosa, it can cause GIT irritation. Because you know that potassium iodide is proteolytic and can damage any surface even if we put it in our hands, it can dissolve the fibrous tissue in the lung. And as you know, this fibrous tissue controls spread of TB. So if this fibrous tissue protective in this lung is destroyed by this potassium iodide, now TB spread can occur with flaring up of the condition. So accordingly, contraindications of potassium iodide are acute bronchitis because of much increased secretion. As I mentioned, the aim of expectorant is in chronic cases mainly. But in acute bronchitis, the secretions are so increased are mainly water. This is the action of iodide. So why use iodides? Iodides are restricted to be used mainly in chronic cough instead. Why? Because the secretion is not so large. This is number one, so required to be more liquefied as well. In these cases, by virtue of inflammatory action and secondary and so on, the secretions are getting more and more thickness, requiring more and more potent stimuli for water secretion, and this is iodide. Second, as mentioned, in tuberculous bronchitis, allergy, and hypothyroidism, as I mentioned, in adverse effects. Lastly, mucolytics, and I mentioned these drugs which break down mucus and so decrease sputum viscosity without affecting its volume. This is unlike expectorants, but similar uses, of course. The first drug, and very famous, is bromhexine. Bromhexine destroys sputum by depolymerization of mucopolysaccharides of the thick sputum. So, the viscosity is reduced. There is no integrity of the mucopolysaccharides of the thick sputum. But as most of our drugs used in cough, it causes mild gastric irritation. Next, mucolytic is carbocysteine, and it acts by decreased mucus gland hyperplasia and decreased sputum volume. How it causes decreased viscosity? By disruption or breakdown of SS disulfide bond of this thick sputum. And so, by keeping healthy mucous membrane, it will protect the mucous membrane against infection and damage by microbes and other allergens or foreign substances. The last mucolytic will be acetylcysteine with similar mechanism to carbocysteine, decreasing surface tension and viscosity and given orally and inhalation. But as irritant, in GIT it causes irritation if orally, and if inhalation it causes irritation to bronchi, bronchospasm, and may cause allergy. Again, these drugs, by disruption of disulfide bonds, it can activate many proteins and even drugs like penicillin. Thank you.